Good afternoon. For those of you who have been sitting here through all of the workshops, thank you for your patience, and I hope you're taking advantage of the breaks that we scheduled to give you a chance to stretch your legs and your brain and maybe have a little snack and check out the vendors. So for those of you who weren't here this morning or this afternoon for the first workshop, I'm Amy Bach. I'm the Executive Director of United Policyholders, and we are a co-host of the event today, along with Rebuilding Together Peninsula. With my partner, Carrie Peng Chan here, we and our staffs, we put together these panels to shed light on the issues that your community is facing during the recovery process. And we tried to highlight some of the major issues. This is only one in a series of events we are going to be continuing to host through the one-year anniversary of the event. And I just want to say the last Insurance 101 program we did, we tried to get a feel from the audience about what other subjects folks would want to hear about. And we got a very clear request for information on how to make the decision to rebuild or buy, which is going to be the fourth workshop. We were also asked about a vendor fair. And we know there are a lot of tax questions that are out there. I was at the town hall meeting that Congresswoman Spear hosted, and we actually had invited a representative from the IRS to come today, but they are going to be holding their own event here sometime in the near future. And I want to give you our word that United Policyholders will be offering an educational program on tax issues, but we're going to see what the IRS brings, and then we'll make sure that we're not duplicating, but that we'll be just adding, supplementing. So our panel for this third workshop, we've got Ken Crown, who is a professional claims adjuster. He's also with the Greenspan Company, a public adjusting firm that's local. They're based, their headquarters are in South San Francisco, but they do have offices around the state. And you heard from his colleague, Allison Hunt, in the first workshop on, she's a content specialist. Kenny is a full claim specialist, so he will handle for his clients, soup to nuts, everything, including documenting their losses and negotiating a settlement with the insurance company. So Ken is on the panel. And then Michael McCutchen, who is a builder, a contractor. For those of you who were at the second workshop, you heard his introduction. And both these guys are very valuable speakers for this community, because not only are they both local, but they're very experienced in post-disaster damage issues, from documenting construction costs to insurance negotiations to building to concluding insurance negotiations and getting back home. Now, before I let them get started, and you can all read the disclaimer up there, we're here, we come in peace, but we have to put this out there. I'm a lawyer, and I just want to make sure it's clear we're not trying to give anybody specific legal advice here. So just so that you all understand, if you haven't gotten sick of hearing from me on the listserv or at any of the meetings where I've popped up to offer information, we do have a library online at our website, UpHelp.org. And in addition to offering tips, we have the top 10 claim tips and things like speak up, effective communication. These are very pragmatic suggestions for being your own best advocate in connection with recovering from a loss. But we also offer some samples that may help you to absorb and use the information you're getting from our experts today. So some of our samples have actually been donated to us by people like the Greenspan Company and by builders for educational purposes. So for example, at our website, we've got a sample scope of loss. We have a sample Xactimate estimate, and just so you can see what it looks like. And we have what's called a trade summary breakdown, which gives you lists of items that you should see in a repair rebuilding estimate. So with that, I want to turn the floor over to Ken Crown, and he is going to basically be answering a series of questions that you'll see on the slides, but he's going to give it in with his own perspective. And Ken, I didn't have a minute to ask you how long you've been an adjuster.
1984.
Okay.
I started with the firm when I was 22. Started doing inventories, worked my way up.
And I wanted him because when our former insurance commissioner, John Garamendi, who is one of the best insurance regulators we've ever had in the state, went on to work in Congress, and I think he's there now. When his mother's house had a fire, he hired Kenny to be her adjuster. So that speaks a lot, I think, and I wanted him to be on our panel. So Ken, you can either sit or stand at your choice.
Okay. I'll stand up. Start with the questions, or should I just?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I can talk a little bit too.
And I will say, Ken offered to have Mike, if you want to add something, he's okay with you piping in just to keep the flow going. But we will have Q&A at the end.
Sure. And some of the questions I saw, I really felt that Mike would be best suited for, or that we can both share. So, what are the steps to getting a fair insurance settlement? I guess I could say hire a public adjuster first, but fair. You know, I think insurance companies try to be fair. I mean, they're not out to just screw insureds, and that's not how we approach losses and sell losses. But I think the first thing is to get as educated as possible. And, you know, if you're not familiar with the process, which a lot of people are, and you've got plenty of coverage, meaning there's more than adequate coverage, then there is a need to hire an advocate, which is what we do, to assist in putting together the claim. First things first is, if your home's completely destroyed to the ground, you've got to recreate it. And I came in at the tail end of Michael's meeting, and I worked with Michael on a large multi-million-dollar home that was not totally destroyed. But trying to recreate a home that's been completely destroyed, where there's nothing left, in Xactimate is foolish. It just is very difficult to get done. You can use Xactimate, it's a tool, but first things first is talk to the insurance company, go to the other homes that are down the street, or have them agree to a set of preliminary plans to get the architect the insured is thinking of using to put together a bid specification package to document as substantially as possible the home and the finishes that existed, and then get bids. Get a general contractor. The general contractor, if he's got a preliminary set of plans and he's got specification package, you can get sub-bids, because the Xactimate prices, if this was a home that's been customized over the years, it's not going to match up to the finishes. Firestorms are a little different. You've got sometimes, and this isn't as severe as San Diego. In San Diego, I went through 4 different adjusters. On the Santa Barbara loss I had, it was a $12 million loss. We went through 3 adjusters before we finally got it resolved. Usually it takes about 2 to 4 months to put together a well-documented, detailed building claim. The contents can take longer because you're having to recreate the personal property, and to me that's not as important as the building, especially if there's time limits, although I believe most of the policies extend it to 24 months under the Firestorm. But usually, you know, recreating it, getting the architect involved, finding out what the codes, the process, it can take a good 4 months on a building claim. Contents claims can take anywhere from 4 to 8 months because you're busy concentrating on getting your plans submitted and getting the construction underway. Depends on how righteous the insurance.
So it could be as less than a month, but it could also take 6 months or longer, right?
Sure. You're not going to get settled in a month. It's going to take 2 months to put together.
We had
minimum.
one settled in a month. Chubb did one in a week. They took our estimate. But like the first one I ever did with Ken was the one for Betty and Bruno.
Right.
That one you did pretty quickly, but maybe that was 9 months or 12 or something, begin to finish, something like that?
No, usually, well, I didn't handle Betty Ann Bruno's, but usually the losses, it depends on how difficult the loss is and how much information you have. But if you have information readily available, or if it's a Chubb, which is a completely different insurance company, usually on just a regular fire takes anywhere from 30 to 60 days to put a claim together. On an out-of-site building loss that's completely burned to the ground can usually take 3 to 4 months, sometimes longer. Depends on how quickly we can get the information from the insured and from the insured's architect. As far as settling a claim, it depends on the insurance company, depends on how much information you have, how quickly you submit the claim, whether they've brought out a legitimate contractor, are they working with the insured's general contractor. But usually from the time we submit a claim, typically 60 days, sometimes 90 days to settle it. Sometimes only 30 days. Really depends on the players, depends on the adjuster from the insurance company. Is it someone we've worked with before? Our role is to represent the insured in measuring, documenting the losses, and negotiating a successful settlement. We take the burden off of an insured's shoulders, so you're not having to deal with the insurance company. You can try to get back to your normal lives, although it won't be ever normal until the home is rebuilt. But we certainly alleviate the burden off of your shoulders. We're kind of like a quarterback. We guide you through the process, help you recreate the personal property that was destroyed, help put together a detailed building claim, deal with the insurance company personnel, their experts that they bring in, their building consultants, their adjusters, and obviously maximize the recovery on your behalf. The more we collect for you, the more you make, the more we make, and we certainly earn our fee if you've spoken to any of our clientele. Public adjusters, our fees, depending on the size of the loss, typically range from 6.5% up to 10%. Sometimes we charge 12.5%, depending on the nature of the loss. Our fees are typically not covered, although some commercial policies for commercial businesses will have coverage for claims adjusting expenses. Sometimes they exclude public adjusters' fees, sometimes they don't. However, our fees typically, at least on a commercial side, are tax deductible. It's part of the cost of running your business. Yes, Steve?
In San Bruno, we have across the board 7%.
7%. Okay, good. Good.
Can I ask a question, since you are open to people piping in?
Excuse me, could you use the
Yeah,
microphone?
sure. You mentioned that that it's that insurers other than commercial policies won't reimburse a homeowner for the fee they pay to you. We heard some questions earlier about what about getting them to pay for my architect's fees? What about getting them to pay for my, let's say if I have to get an appraisal of valuables?
Right. Well, you see that booklet there? That was a $12 million home that I handled. That's just volume 1 of a personal property claim. That was in Santa Barbara. And first of all, the insurance company, the cost of proving the loss is the insured, but an insurance company should pay for the value of appraisals that are done. It's the only way to properly value it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. As far as architectural fees, and there's different ways to play it, but an insurance company knows that there's no way you can recreate a building without getting a proper bid. And in fairness, if you get an actual drawing of what the house, how it existed, what finishes there were, it actually makes it easier for the insurance company to pay. Typically on losses I've handled, and there was one I think Michael and I had, where we got the insurance company to agree. It wasn't an exorbitant expense, $3,500 back then, to put together just a set of just preliminary plans, got an architect to put together a bid specification package, and it allowed us to provide a detailed Xactimate estimate, but at the same time allowed us to get sub bids. But if you're trying to just recreate a building that's been burnt to the ground without a set of plans, you can do it. It's not going to be as accurate as getting an estimate based on a preliminary set of plans. And usually insurance companies, if they're a good company, will go ahead and pay. They're not going to pay $10,000, but they'll pay a certain amount that's necessary to get a decent bid generated.
So if anybody didn't get a handout and needs one, raise your hand.
By the way, I overheard if you've got some existing homes that are model homes, I don't think there's a problem with going into, if you can get permission, go into that home and have the insurance company adjuster, their contractor, your contractor, do a off of that home. I mean, that's not that hard to do, and you can use Xactimate for something like that. We've done that before. But you also need a good engineer, too, an architect. There's going to be a lot of code upgrades. You're going to have soil stabilization issues, all kinds of issues regarding that. So you need to get an engineer before you can get a proper bid. If you're having coverage issues, now you don't need an attorney unless there's coverage issues. If there's coverage issues, the insurance company has, for example, you may have what's called extended replacement cost coverage. And with extended replacement costs, it agrees that if you've not remodeled the home and you've increased the value by more than either 5% or $5,000, then we will provide an additional 25% or 50% more coverage for your building. Well, sometimes they'll interview you right after a fire, you're distraught, and they say, well, have you done remodeling? Oh, I've done lots of remodeling. What have you done? Oh, I remodeled the bathrooms. I did this, I did that. Well, one time we had an insured who was denied coverage. And, you know, we ended up getting involved. Before we got them an attorney, we asked the same questions, but a remodeling is different than an upgrade. The intention of that clause in the policy is that if you upgrade a home, if you do a room addition, which means you should have increased the amount of insurance, then you're prejudicing the insurance company's right to have collected a greater premium. So just because you've done remodeling, if you're replacing tile for tile, carpet for carpet, that clause is not impacted and you're still entitled to your 25%. But if there's coverage issues where an insurance company is denying coverage or they're denying an aspect of the claim, and if we can't handle it, we certainly will typically refer you to an attorney.
So just to clarify then, I know a lot of you here actually have retained counsel in connection with your non-insurance damages, and that's a completely separate matter. That's not what we're talking about here. But certainly before you entered into any final settlement discussions with your insurance company, you would want to check with your lawyer if you've got one. That's just, I think, would be prudent.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the property claim, not to what's ongoing. Well, you know, that's a twofold question. A lot of times, the way insurance companies work is some of the contractors, a lot of them that they have bidding for them, they're on their lists, and it's a preferred list of contractors. And they're on their list not because they bid high, but because they bid low. It's not that they bid low purposely, but they're doing volume business. And they're not, by the way, contractors like Michael. These are contractors that do the $50,000 repair or $100,000 repair, not the $500,000 to $1 million rebuild of a brand new home. And it's all volume oriented. So that's why the insurance company uses them. And when their prices get too high, they knock them off the list. They bring in someone new. But there are some contractors that bid for the insurance company that aren't that bad. And you just need to check them all out. But when it comes to new construction, I can't say unequivocally that the insurance company contractors are the way to go, because it's not what they do day in and day out. They do a lot of fire repair, not rebuilding from the ground up. Well, they say they'll guarantee it. Yeah, usually they're on their list for 2-3 years. You're going to get the same guarantee from a regular general contractor. So I wouldn't hire a contractor because the insurance company guarantees their work. And if they do guarantee their work, then I'd be questioning, why should I even hire this person? I mean, why does the insurance company have to guarantee their work? Yes, absolutely. I guess, one of the things that you run into, and maybe you have already, you go ahead, you do your demolition, and now you've got damages to the foundation if it was figured to be salvaged, or you have damage to your walkways, your concrete driveways. Yes, you can submit a supplemental claim. Your claim doesn't end until you're actually back in your house. And along the way, you're gonna run into issues. Permit costs are going to be more. You may have increased construction costs. In the Oakland Firestorm, from the time they actually started writing estimates, it wasn't, in some instances, till 2 years later that the home was starting construction. Well, construction costs went way up. Same thing happened in San Diego. So you should be looking at not just what it costs right now to rebuild, but if you're not going to be able to start reconstruction for a year from now, what's it going to cost then? Well, hopefully, you've put together a well-documented, detailed scope of repair. What I suggested, there's different ways to approach a claim. When you hire a public adjuster, at least this is what I do, is I methodically go through and analyze the building. I meet with the insurance company adjuster. Who's the contractor you want to bring out? Is it someone that I know that I've worked with before? Sometimes it's just getting the right players. You want to put together a proper plan. You want to get an engineer on board right away. You want to get a soils engineer. You want to address any foundation issues. Is the foundation up to code? And then you want to put together a well-detailed, documented scope of repair. You want to include your interior design fees, if you had an interior designer, your architecture fees. Everything that encompasses what the construction costs are going to be, you outline, whether it be in Xactimate or in a detailed bid schedule provided by the architect. And that way, you shouldn't have as many issues, because the insurance company has to bid off of the same document that you want your contractor to bid off of. And if you're proactive with the insurance company and you're getting them involved in the process, we want to use these set of plans, this bid specification package. And by the way, we're going to get sub-bids. Do you have a problem with that, Mr. Insurance Company? That way you can kind of control the numbers much greater. Well, the contractor's the one that has to rebuild. This is a touchy situation because contractors aren't licensed to be public adjusters, but the truth is they are involved in the process. I think you're going to have your contractor bidding the scope of repair. I think the question is, what is that scope of repair? How does the policy respond to it? So, for example, the scope of repair calls for the cost to rebuild the home. Does that include interior design fees? Well, did I have an interior designer that worked on my home or not? If you didn't have one in the past, then the insurance company could argue, rightfully so, it shouldn't be included in the scope of repair. But you're going to need a general contractor to provide you with the appropriate pricing, and you've got to put together that scope of repair. And that's what we do. We put that scope of repair together. For those that don't have a public adjuster, you can get the general contractor involved. But the insurance company does not necessarily have to listen to them, but they are the ones that are going to be rebuilding the home, and hopefully you've got a smart general contractor involved to help you with it.
Okay, you've done a great job. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
One thing I was going to bring up, apparently Amy mentioned to me there were some issues now with driveways having cracks in them.
I was mentioning to Ken about the situation with some people having some cracks that weren't there before, and that there being a way in which the blast was a little like an earthquake, and there being some disputes going on between people and their insurers over whether the damage was caused by the blast or pre-existing. So I mentioned that to Ken.
Right. First of all, if the crack has been exacerbated, it's obviously from the explosion. One way to find out is you can very easily get the insurance company to agree to pay to do a core of the cracking. If you do a core petroglyph, it's going to tell you how old the crack is.
What does that mean, a core?
Well, they go in, they core through the concrete, and then they send the core to a lab, and they can date the cracking, whether it occurred over the last 3 months or whether this occurred from 3-4 years ago. And it may have occurred from 3 or 4 years ago, but sometimes they can also determine whether the crack has widened or worsened. Question?
Oh, yeah. You know what? If you wouldn't mind holding your question until yeah? Okay. Kenny's not going away. So we'll bring up Michael again, Michael McCutchen with McCutchen Construction. And actually, we go way back as well. United Policyholders was founded right around the Oakland fire in 1991. So Michael was one of the contractors at that time who worked with a lot of the families. Very familiar with all the issues we're discussing.
Thank you, Amy. Well, if you were a general contractor, you could tell by looking at the insurance company's estimate. If you're a local general contractor, you could go through it in detail and you would know. You'd know how to evaluate it. If you're not, I don't care if you're an architect or an engineer, by the way, you still don't know. And actually, even for me, the only way I'd know if it was fair is I'd have to do a really careful analysis of what were we estimating. So what we kept saying earlier and today, that you need to have these as-built plans for exactly what you had, and you keep wondering, why do they need that? I can tell them I had walls, I had floors. Well, it's because in our industry, see those motions I did, the hand motions? That's not how we estimate. We estimate off of plans, and subcontractors in particular, and suppliers, they estimate off of plans. So that's why that's necessary. So first we'd look at the plans, and we'd look at the estimates. And if we were unclear about some of them, then we'd get some local subs and suppliers that we trusted to come up with an estimate based on the plans, and then we'd know if it was fair. Well, so yeah, the first thing that typically you want to deal with in any dispute over the value of anything, whether actually it's a fire loss or it could be as simple as, why are two contractors not agreeing on the cost to remodel my kitchen? The first thing to look at is you could say the quantities, and then these other things like the repair methods, the material quantities. I want to talk about it for a second. I remember years ago I got 2 bids from reputable subcontractors. See, you might think that as a general contractor I'm not very involved maybe in a whole lot of bidding. Well, it's the exact opposite, because imagine we're like the conductor. We get hundreds and probably thousands of bids every year from various suppliers and subs. We're used to it, and they never agree. It's even difficult for us. I remember a job where we had 2 stucco bids, same exact job, and they were wildly different. I think one was $13,000, one was $9,000. And I knew they were both reputable. Why were they so different? Well, it turns out one guy figured he could do a 2-coat job. The walls were kind of wavy. The other guy said, well, to do it to my satisfaction, I'm going to do a first coat to smooth the walls, then I'm going to do the 2-coat job. So I asked the owner, I said, can you handle a little waviness, or do you want to spend the extra to have it totally flat? And that owner said, a little waviness won't bother me. But what I'm saying is, even for me, it's hard to compare without talking to the subs and really finding out. Reputable people in the industry aren't making stuff up. There are reasons why prices vary, okay? And you have to do a little research, and that's where somebody like Ken is useful. You just heard that comment he made about the cracks in the concrete. I didn't even know to do that. How many of you know to do that? That's the benefit of having the experienced people. I don't know, Ken will know a lot more about this than me, but I know in the Oakland fire, we often got dual finishes. We got carpet over hardwood, or we got wood paneling over drywall or plaster. We were able to get dual finishes, maybe because they were flexible.
No, you're entitled, and this is why I kind of wanted, it's always good that, it's always good to have a feedback question. I'm sure we'll do that afterwards, but you're entitled to carpet and pad if you had it over hardwood floors. What you're not entitled to is the cost to sand and refinish the floors. But you're entitled to the cost to sand and seal, just not the refinishing. Because the minute you put carpet and pad and you tacked it down to the floors, you automatically would have to refinish if you ever took it over. But the insurance companies a lot of times will say, oh no, we don't owe for 2 finished floors. No, you do. You owe for 2 floors. You just don't owe for the refinishing, but you owe for the sand and seal, new hardwood floor, carpet and pad.
So multiply that very detailed example I just gave you by 1,000 items, maybe, something like that, in a typical loss. That's probably even before you get to contents, but maybe it includes contents. I mean, what kind of belt buckles did you have? This is why they have an industry of people who help us. Anyway, go on. Well, the insurance industry uses Xactimate, which is the main benefit of it is if you have a partial loss, they do room-by-room estimates. So I think it's actually a wonderful tool. Xactimate's tried to break into the general construction industry with very limited success. Most contractors do not use Xactimate. Most contractors figure out their costs of labor by the number of hours and that kind of stuff, and then they include sub and supplier bids in detail. That's how we actually estimate. So in other words, we don't, as a general contractor, when you say plumbing, we don't typically go in and say 3 hose bibs, you might not, that means the faucet on the outside, 3 hose bibs at $157 each. We don't usually do that. We say plumbing package from so-and-so plumbing, and then we have 3 or 4 plumbing bids that are based on these plans we have that show how many hose outlets there are, how many hose bibs, you follow? And then we put a number in, and then we apply a fee. So we use sub bids, supplier bids for things like carpet, windows, doors, hardware, all those things. There's a tile, there's a million things we have to put together. And then we have labor, that's demolition, carpentry, drywall, all this stuff that's labor, so that we assemble all that together. That's a little different. Xactimate's more like 154 lineal feet of baseboard at 87 cents. That's kind of an Xactimate. It's a different way. It's a unit cost method. It's not invalid, but the biggest problem around here is that their adjustments for San Francisco area typically are not accurate, in my opinion. They don't give us enough for the local cost.
You can't do tiles for $15 a square foot installed.
Well, maybe you can, but a lot of the tile I put in, the tile itself costs $20. So how can you put that in for -$5? It's not generally going to happen. No, you don't have to do it in Xactimate. And Xactimate will give trade summaries, so we can look at Xactimate and translate it over to what the rest of us are doing. So it's not an impossible situation. Construction supervision is the non-physical labor work that the contractor has to provide to get the job done. Ken will be commenting on this, I hope, in a second, but I would say we've had mixed results getting supervision out of insurance companies, but sometimes we can do it. What would you say about it?
Well, I was going to comment 2 things. I want to just go back to what Michael shared, and this is really important for you guys because I suspect you've either gotten numbers from your insurance company or you're fighting with them now because you've got contractors that are much higher. Michael brought up something that's called a contractor's worksheet. And what Xactimate can do, which you can give to your general contractor, if the scope is valid from the insurance company, you can give what's called a contractor's worksheet. We'll break out the linear footage of cabinetry of uppers, the linear footage of lower cabinetry. It will break out the tile. It will break out the amount of linear footage of baseboard to paint, of openings to paint. So what you can do is you could give it to your general contractor, and he can then give it to the subs. And that's one way of trying to work with the insurance company. As far as supervision, I mean, we go around and around with it. I don't know why the insurance company has this misbelief that overhead includes supervision. It doesn't. And typically, if you go to any custom builder, they're going to break out their supervision. They're going to break out their overhead may be lower, but they'll have in numbers for insurance, liability, daily cleanup, final cleanup, supervision, project manager. Their overhead and profit percentages may be different, but supervision is not part of overhead. It should be paid. And on a large job, this Santa Barbara loss, we had a year's worth of supervision full-time with an assistant. So it really depends, but you're going to have supervision. Is it a full-time supervisor? Maybe, maybe not, but you can't rebuild a home from the ground up without a superintendent.
And the insurance company will pay for it if you play your cards right. Again, Ken might have a better understanding of this than me, but I have the opinion that you actually only owe the insurance company one estimate from a general contractor. You can get as many as you can talk people into. But I could also say, though, one of the keys to making the general contractor's estimate, if you should elect to get only one representing you, is that they will have to have multiple sub and supplier bids from reputable local people. So in other words, if they have a range of bids for the drywall work, it shows that they're not just making stuff up. And then if they can negotiate a reasonable set of fees, contractors take all their costs and they add something. I would say at least 10%, 15%, 20%, something like that. So they add, that's the contractor fee. And then they probably have supervision, maybe some insurance and other things that they add on, right, over the cost. So you have to negotiate that, but you need to have the general contractor be willing to not just use their buddy Joe, who always does my plumbing. That ain't going to cut it. You're going to have to get 3 reputable bids. Ken, what would you say about it?
Well, if the insurance company has brought out a quote their contractor bidding,
We've already got 2 then.
yeah, and you've got and let's assume your contractor's here, they're down here, and maybe it's not scope issues, maybe it's strictly price. Then I think that you've got to at least put the insurance company's contractor to task, ask them for sub bids. I've always liked Mike's approach, and that is, you know what? Get sub bids, get legitimate sub bids, because a lot of times the fire reconstruction contractors for the insurance companies, they don't have a chance for a job. They know it. They're just writing an estimate using Xactimate. They haven't spent the time necessary to understand the type of finishes that were in the home and haven't necessarily gotten sub bids. And sub bids don't lie. So, get as many sub bids as you can.
So the answer is you can get away with 1 general, probably, because the insurance company is going to do their own estimate anyway. What else have we got? Well, not only can your contractor work with the public adjuster, they must work with the public adjuster. But the public adjusters typically also have their own people they can bring in if you don't have a contractor. They may, in many cases, have their own internal ability to do certainly Xactimate estimates, but they know contractors, right, Ken?
Right. Yeah. What we've done, and by the way, in answer to your question, Michael, if there is still a major difference between the insurance company's contractor's estimate and your contractor, you can always get another contractor.
Get one
There's
at that
nothing
point.
wrong, just to back it up. In regards, what we do is a lot of times where insured has their own general contractor but can't write an Xactimate sheet, even with Michael, is we have people internally who can write Xactimate, and we'll work together with the general contractor in tailoring that Xactimate scope so that they can use it for estimating purposes.
I just want to say one last thing, is when you have that dispute, that was a slide about 10 slides ago, the first thing to argue about is the scope of work. Look in great detail, was it 123 feet of baseboard or 154 feet of baseboard? That's the easiest thing to bargain. Start with that and then work your way to cost. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael and Ken. And before we get to the questions, I just want to bring it back to something that we talked about at the beginning of this workshop, which is where do I go if there's a dispute? How do we resolve it? And I was talking about how so often people go off track in their negotiations because they're talking about apples to oranges. They're saying, here's my real living, breathing contractor's estimate. This is what this person is going to charge me to do this work. And the insurance company has come in with this computer estimate, and the adjuster's marching orders just to go on that, and they can't be compared because they're not, the quantities are different, the qualities. So if you're trying to be your own best advocate and you're trying to get on the right track, then the best thing that you can do is try to iron out the areas of difference between you and the insurance company. And it's very hard to figure that out if you're not working off the same scope. So if you can get a really good scope, a really good document, whether you pay somebody to do it or you have a public adjuster that does it, or you get somebody like Michael who's willing to do it, if you can get the insurance company to agree, okay, we may not agree on all the prices, but at least we're agreeing that this is how much paint, this is how much wood, this is how much tile we need, then it's easier to resolve the differences, because until you know what is causing this dollar discrepancy, it's very hard to get to closure. And then I want to mention a couple resources that we offer on dispute resolution. One is we actually have a whole section of our website on claim dispute resolution. So you can go to UpHelp.org and put in the search box claim dispute, and it'll bring you to a page where we walk you through a whole number of possible places you can go. The Department of Insurance, a public adjuster, a lawyer, a mediation, an insurance appraisal. But again, that's a place to go after your informal attempts have broken down. And I have to say that in my experience, there's nothing like in-person meetings between you, the builder that you have confidence in, and the adjuster to try to bring things together. Because phone and email will not work as well as a sit-down might. And I want to clarify something from the last workshop we did on insurance, where we had a couple that came up from San Diego, and they spoke. And they said, they recommended against hiring a public adjuster. And I want to explain why they said it and explain why that is not generally our view. Our view, we present a menu because everybody is different, okay? Those people were underinsured. They were very underinsured. And they did the math and thought, okay, if we hire a PA, we're already short on what we need, then we're going to be even more short. I don't think any of you are in that scenario here for a lot of reasons. You've got PG&E in the background to help cover, and there's other sources for you of funding. So I don't think that math applies here, but you need to do your own math. You need to figure out, okay, where am I? Do I need professional help? Can I do this on my own? And I think that's all I really wanted to throw out there to you, to put it in context. And questions?
To Ken, back to the was-built drawings. Now, you mentioned that there's something else you add to the was-built drawings to help you come up with a number. You said
Yeah, sometimes if you've got an architect, well, the scope of repair is really important. Now, whether you're capable of putting that together yourself, or I think before even doing the scope, sometimes if you're working with an architect, they can provide what's called a bid specification package, which talks about, an example, I understand these are not custom homes, but that a lot of the homes, they may have redwood. They may have clear heart redwood siding. That's important. There's a tremendous difference between fir and clear heart redwood, and that's what you're entitled to have. And so a bid specification package will talk about the type of doors, what size doors, what kind of hardware was on it. The more detailed, the greater the dollars will be. And that way, at least the insurance company is bidding off of the same document that your general contractor is going to be bidding off of.
So we want to have both the was-built drawings plus this bid specification
Specification package. It can be a detailed scope of repair. There's different ways to do it. Obviously, the detailed scope of repair that the insurance company puts together or that we would put together comes off of the plans, what existed, the bid specification package, or going to another home that's already existing and doing a takeoff of that entire home, and then interviewing the insured and sitting down with them and recreating all the upgrades that they did. It's a laborious process.
Can I just throw in one thing before we lose it, which is that the construction settlement is doubly or even triply critical because many of the other adjustments are based on that. So in other words, percentages of construction would limit I think contents is often 70% or 50%, landscape 10%, demo 10%, et cetera. So if you don't get a good construction claim, you might be limited in other areas.
Well, so I'm so sorry. I don't want to cut off discussion, but we have to be on time for our last workshop. So can I ask our speakers if you're willing to chat with people out in the hall?
Sure.
Okay. So if you have questions that didn't get answered, could you ask our speakers out in the hallway? And yeah.
One comment here. Mike, it's good to see you again. But in the open house fire, one of the keys in settling with your insurance company was once you knew where the quantity differences were, then when we settled the Oakland Hills fire, Mike, it's good to see you again. One of the important things is to come up with your quantities. How many board feet of redwood do you need? How many board feet of plywood do you need? Once you have the quantity settled, folks, then the insurance company's got to pay attention to what's going on there because that's what it takes to build the house. And that's how you can get the insurance companies to play off. Mike, and I can remember this very vividly, came through with a number of factors and helped a number of my people get their insurance companies to pay for stuff they didn't think they were going to pay for. They did, because we said, here, this is what it takes to build the house. Now, you're going to build us a house with no windows?
Right. There's nothing like
It
a
worked.
great advocate on your side, right? Right, gentlemen? Perfect closing for our session. If you didn't, if you didn't get a raffle ticket, then raise your hand. And if you didn't get a handout, let us know. And thank you again to our panelists. And if you have questions that didn't get answered, feel free to collar them out in the hallway. Thank you so much.